And this is your host.
You know, it is incredibly easy to just treat the music you listen to as background noise. Like you put on a playlist while you're answering emails or, you have something thumping in your headphones at the gym.
Oh, totally. Just playing softly while you cook dinner or something.
Right. It just functions as a mood setter. Audio wallpaper, basically. But what if that completely misses the point? What if the music you're listening to right now is actually a really precise, unfiltered reflection of your lived reality?
See, that completely flips the framework of how we interact with sound. Instead of music just being, something that happens to us as passive consumers, it acts as something speaking profoundly for us.
And that shift in perspective, that is the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring a truly fascinating university thesis from 2013, written by Augusto Cesar Araujo Santos from the Federal University of Goiás in Brazil.
Yeah, and on the surface, the source material appears to be a paper about percussion and music education. But the actual premise is radically deeper than that.
Much deeper.
The author basically argues that music is the ultimate language of human awakening. It functions as a tool for social liberation, a way to, literally read the complex world around you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if this author's premise actually holds up, we need to ask you, the listener, to just stop for a second and deeply analyze the soundtrack of your own life. What does it actually reveal about your environment?
Well, to even begin answering that, we have to rethink our definition of language from the ground up. We are heavily conditioned to think of language strictly as written words or spoken sentences.
Right, like words on a page.
Exactly. And the thesis points out a massive limitation in that assumption. Written language is effective for transferring data, sure, but it lacks total holistic expression.
Because words are just abstract symbols, right?
Yes. The letters S-A-D do not contain actual sorrow. They are just a coded symbol you have to read, pass through the logical filter of your brain, decode it, and then finally understand it.
That makes a lot of sense.
But music, according to this research, bypasses that conceptual filter entirely. It brings the real from the inside out.
Bringing the real from the inside out. I really love that phrasing. So words just describe a feeling from a distance, whereas music embodies the feeling itself.
Precisely.
But I'm trying to wrap my head around the actual mechanics of that. Like, how exactly does sound bypass our logical brain?
What's fascinating here is that the author brings in the aesthetics of philosophy to explain this. Specifically, they cite a concept discussed by Nuria Sanchez regarding the philosopher Lukács. They argue that rhythm and melody act as mimesis.
Mimesis, like the root of the word mimicry.
Yeah, but on a much deeper biological level than just, imitating a bird call or a train whistle.
Okay.
Music acts as a direct physical and sonic imitation of the true nature of human emotions. Think about anger, sweetness, courage, temperance.
Right.
When you hear a furious, chaotic drum solo, it is not acting as a polite symbol of anger. The sound waves are literally mimicking the biological, energetic reality of human being experiencing rage. And because it operates as a direct imitation of that state, when we hear it, our soul, our inner nervous system, physically changes to match it. We feel pain or joy as if we are facing the physical reality of that emotion right there in the room.
That makes total sense. It's almost like music is a direct neural download of an emotion that completely bypasses the translation software of spoken words.
Yes.
Like if I say, I am feeling melancholic, your brain has to boot up the English dictionary, process the grammar, and then imagine what melancholy feels like.
Right, takes work.
But if I just sit down at a piano and play a really slow, descending minor chord progression, I don't need to translate a single thing. I just download the melancholy straight into your nervous system.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. It operates as an unfiltered download.
Yeah.
And, historically, human societies haven't just recognized this instinctively. They've built entire civilizations around this exact communicative mechanism.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. And we can see the ultimate manifestation of this in the history of Afro-Brazilian rhythms.
Let's follow that thread. Because if music is a language that bypasses the logical brain, I guess the natural next step is to look at cultures that didn't just use it for art, but literally spoke it in their daily lives.
Exactly.
The thesis dives heavily into how this abstract idea becomes very concrete when we look at African traditions.
Right. So in many traditional African contexts detailed in the source, there was absolutely no separation between spoken language, playing instruments, singing, and dancing.
Which is so different from how we view it today.
Completely different. We often categorize those as four separate artistic hobbies.
Hmm.
But in these cultures, they were an entirely integrated web of communication, used in both daily and sacred life. The rhythms themselves were originally birthed directly from speech. Spoken phrases were physically adapted onto the instruments.
Wait, I need to push back on the literalness of this for a second.
Sure.
Are we talking about a metaphor here, or were the drums actually acting as a linguistic substitute for words? Like, how does a listener decode drum hits into a sentence in real time? That sounds incredibly complex.
Oh, it is deeply complex.
Hmm.
But it functions beautifully because the spoken languages in many of these West African regions are heavily tonal.
Ah, okay.
So the pitch, the inflection, and the rhythmic cadence of how you say a word fundamentally change its meaning.
Ah,
If you extract that exact pitch variation, rhythmic bounce, and transfer it onto the skin of a drum, the community, who already shares that tonal language, can physically hear the phonetic contours of the words.
oh, I think I get it. It's like how in English we can hum the inflection of a question without using any words at all, and anyone listening still knows we're asking something.
Exactly.
So the drum is doing that, but with a massive, sophisticated vocabulary.
That humming analogy captures it perfectly. Now just scale that up to an entire communication network. The thesis explains how this linguistic rhythm was leveraged for highly specific psychological and spiritual purposes.
Like in sacred spaces.
Yes,
Yeah.
in sacred spaces, rhythms represented specific circumstances or even specific deities. Take the example of Ogum, the god of strength in war.
How does a drummer communicate that specific energy, though?
To evoke Ogum in a ritual space, the drummers wouldn't just start playing generically loud, fast beats. They played a highly specific, linguistically derived rhythmic variation that was energetically tied to Ogum.
Like a sonic signature.
Exactly. It was engineered to physically induce a state of deep spiritual connection or even possession in the listeners. They were actively manipulating the psychological energy of the room using the literal coded language of the drum.
That is amazing. And the text also mentioned they had physical techniques to manipulate human psychology on the dance floor, too. There was like a specific rhythmic trick used to make a dance violently energetic. How did that work?
The author breaks down the mechanics of syncopation used in these rituals.
Hmm.
Normally, the human brain expects the heaviest, loudest beat of a drum to land right on the strong downbeat, the one of a musical measure.
Right, that gives a sense of stability.
Yes. But what these drummers would do is intentionally drop that heavy bass hit just a fraction of a second before the downbeat.
Oh, wow. It's sonic manipulation.
It really is.
By hitting it early, it creates this driving, urgent tension. Your brain is waiting for the resolution of the downbeat, but the drum rushes it. It gives the listener the psychological impression of increased speed and forward momentum, even if the actual tempo of the song hasn't sped up a single beat per minute.
It completely destabilizes the listener's center of gravity. It forces the dancers to move with greater violence and frantic energy just to resolve the physical tension the drum is projecting into the room.
That is so cool.
And this linguistic, manipulative power of rhythm didn't remain static in one region. It traveled, evolved, and collided with other cultures in a massive historical process the author refers to as acculturation.
And the lineage mapped out in the thesis is staggering.
It truly is. The author traces a specific tradition of challenging singing, essentially these high-stakes vocal duels or improvisational competitions that originated in Arab societies.
Right, picture a fierce call and response vocal battle.
Exactly. That tradition moves into Africa, where it collides with the tonal drum languages we just discussed. Then, through the devastating, brutal history of the transatlantic slave trade and colonization, these deeply complex rhythmic structures were forced into the hulls of ships, brought to Portugal, and ultimately anchored in Brazil.
Where they just crashed headfirst into European musical forms, right? Like the polka, the mazurka, and the waltz.
Yes, exactly.
It's incredible to think about this massive collision of cultures, survival tactics, and raw expression forming the foundation of Afro-Brazilian styles like samba. The music is acting as a literal historical map of human movement, immense suffering, and ultimate resilience.
The rhythms carry the DNA of every culture they interacted with, which sets the stage perfectly for the specific case study the author uses to anchor all this theory.
Right.
We've talked about grand historical movements across centuries, but to really understand this, we have to look at an individual artist who took the specific struggles of his people and translated them into a new sonic reality.
And I am so glad we get to talk about the legendary Brazilian musician Luiz Gonzaga, because Gonzaga's backstory is just the ultimate embodiment of the author's argument.
Oh, absolutely.
He was born in the Sertão, which is this harsh, semi-arid backlands region of northeastern Brazil. We are talking about a place defined by grueling physical labor and brutal, unforgiving droughts.
And the environment of the Sertão is relentless. It shapes the psychology of everyone who lives there.
Yeah.
Gonzaga learns the accordion from his father, deeply absorbing the local sounds. But as a young man, he leaves. He joins the army, literally sells his accordion just to buy a ticket out, eventually scrapes together enough money for another one, and ends up in the sprawling metropolis of Rio de Janeiro.
And what is he playing in the upscale nightclubs of Rio? He's playing tangos, choros, and waltzes.
Right.
He's playing the polite, European-influenced music preferred by the wealthy city dwellers.
He was conforming to the dominant environment. He had basically abandoned his native tongue to speak the musical language of the elite, simply to survive and make a living.
But the thesis recounts a pivotal confrontation that changes everything for him.
Yes.
A group of men from Ceará, a state back in his home region of the Northeast, were at one of his shows in Rio. And they cornered him and issued a direct challenge.
They did.
They threatened to completely boycott him, like not pay him a dime, unless he stopped playing waltzes and played the authentic music from his own region.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they forced him to look in the mirror. That confrontation demanded that Gonzaga tap back into the roots he had suppressed.
Yeah.
In doing so, he began synthesizing the sounds of the backlands, ultimately creating his iconic driving style, the baião. Gonzaga proves the author's thesis because he stopped making music just to please a nightclub crowd. He took the sweat, the relentless drought, the cracked earth, and the raw reality of the Northeastern people, and he translated it into original sonic structures.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The absolute masterpiece of this translation is his song Asa Branca.
Yes, absolutely.
The thesis calls it the definitive anthem of the Sertão, like the anthem of the migrants who were forced to flee their homes because the land was completely dried up. But I found myself really confused by the musical choices here.
How so?
Well, the lyrics tell a nakedly cruel, tragic story of a land totally massacred by drought to the point where even the birds have to flee. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
Yet, Gonzaga composed it in a major key, and he set it to an upbeat, driving dance rhythm. That feels completely contradictory. Why wouldn't he just write a slow, mournful ballad to match the tragic lyrics?
Well, it seems contradictory until you look at the psychology of the people he was representing.
Okay.
If he had written a slow, mournful dirge, it would be very easy for the wealthy listeners in Rio to just categorize it as a simple tragedy, pity the poor migrants, and move on.
Ah.
By setting the devastation to an upbeat, driving rhythm, he captures the fierce resilience of the people, not just their victimhood.
That is brilliant. But what about the chords? The text mentions it's a major key with a minor seventh. How does that physically work to create that feeling?
Okay, so a standard major chord is the sonic equivalent of bright sunshine.
Right.
It feels resolved, stable, and optimistic.
Right.
But the minor seventh is a note that doesn't naturally belong in that happy, resolved scale. When you add it in, it introduces a shadow.
A shadow.
It physically creates an unresolved dissonance,
Yeah.
a sonic clash. It mimics the exact emotional state of the migrant. They possess this profound hope and will to survive, represented by the major key, while carrying the heavy, unresolved sting of their brutal reality, represented by the minor seventh. It creates this intense psychological friction in the ear.
Wow. So you're dancing to the rhythm, feeling the sunshine of the major key, but the lyrics and that dissonant seventh chord are injecting starvation and loss straight into your nervous system.
Exactly. That friction demands your attention. It forces the listener to actually internalize the complex, contradictory reality of the migrant's existence.
And Gonzaga even mapped this complexity onto his band's physical setup, right?
He did.
The thesis points out how unconventional his arrangement was. On the right side of the accordion, the treble side, where all the blight high notes live, he paired the deep, low, booming zabumba drum.
Right.
And then on the left side of the accordion, the bass side, where the low, heavy notes are, he paired the high-pitched metallic triangle. He literally inverted the expected acoustic frequencies.
Yeah. He built a sonic world that forced the audience to process sound differently. He constructed a new language from the ground up.
It's just genius.
And because it was such an authentic, unfiltered translation of a shared human reality, it resonated far beyond the Northeast. It became a unifying musical language for all of Brazil. He proved that when you use music to truly reflect the environment rather than just provide background noise, it becomes a powerful social force.
So we've traced how early cultures translated tonal language to drums and how Gonzaga translated the drought into the biome.
Right.
The author takes all of this and aims it at a massive societal question. How can we use this exact same process to revolutionize our education system?
Which is a huge pivot, but it makes so much sense.
It really does, because if music is the most unfiltered way we understand our reality, then teaching music should be the blueprint for teaching people how to live.
Exactly. The author launches a heavy critique against what he terms technicist education methods. He draws heavily on the philosophy of Paulo Freire, the iconic Brazilian educator who championed liberating education over compliance.
Right.
Technicist education is the model most of us actually endured. It relies on rote memorization. It involves forcing students to memorize the rigid rules of grammar, regurgitate math formulas for standardized tests, or, in a music classroom, rigidly reading notes on a page to perfectly reproduce a piece written by a European composer 300 years ago.
So what does a technicist music class actually look like in practice?
Well, it looks like a teacher placing sheet music in front of a student and grading them solely on their mechanical ability to strike the keys exactly as written, with zero deviation.
Just totally rigid.
Exactly. And the thesis argues this method fundamentally fails because it imposes a preset external reality onto the student. It teaches obedience.
Okay.
A truly liberating education has to start with the student's own internal rhythms and their lived environment. The author warns that our modern society is drowning in fragmented data. Information circulates endlessly on our screens, but it lacks all context.
Yeah, that is so true.
Proper music education isn't designed to churn out concert pianists. It is designed to teach students how to connect the chaotic signs around them so they can, in Freire's words, read the world.
Reading the world, I love that. And the author provides a brilliant practical example of this, which I'll call the oranges and carrots philosophy.
Yes.
So under a technicist education model, a teacher places 2 oranges and 2 carrots on a desk and tells the student 2 + 2 = 4 items. The student repeats 4, they get an A, and the lesson ends. But a liberating, musically minded education looks at those same 2 oranges and 2 carrots and asks the student, look at the distinct textures, flavors, and colors of these elements. What are the infinite creative possibilities we have to combine them and synthesize something entirely new?
It marks a crucial shift from passively consuming facts to actively synthesizing reality.
Exactly.
And the thesis bolsters this by bringing in a really profound concept from the philosopher Rousseau regarding musical harmony.
Oh, right, the harmony concept.
Rousseau observed that in harmony, a single musical note has absolutely no inherent meaning in isolation. A bass note cannot be defined as low unless it is played simultaneously with and compared to a high note. They rely highly on their relationship to define one another.
The notes only exist in context.
Precisely.
But how does the author apply that to a classroom of kids?
Well, it implies that when a student is taught musical harmony, they aren't just learning audio physics. They're experiencing a visceral lesson in how citizens function in a democratic society.
Wow.
Every single person, much like every musical note, possesses a distinct characteristic and frequency. But we only find our true meaning, and we only create a functional harmony by understanding our relationship and our responsibility to the people standing next to us.
That makes total sense.
Like, when you play in a musical ensemble, you quickly realize your individual part sounds terrible if you refuse to listen to the person beside you. It is a direct, experiential lesson in empathy and citizenship.
So what does this all mean? The traditional technicist education model is like handing a child a highly detailed paint-by-numbers kit and grading their worth purely on whether they stayed inside someone else's lines.
Yes, exactly.
But this musical approach, this creative intentionality, is like handing them a blank canvas, a vibrant mixing palette, and asking them to paint how their neighborhood feels today. You aren't teaching them to replicate. You're giving them the tools to process, analyze, and articulate their own existence.
Because the ultimate goal of the classroom isn't the painting itself or the song itself.
Right.
The goal is the awakening of the human being, who suddenly realizes they have the agency to create the painting.
Looking back at the arc of this deep dive, it's just incredible where this thesis takes us.
It really is.
I mean, we started with the abstract aesthetics of music acting as a raw, physical download of human emotion. We trace the mechanics of that through the literal talking drums of West Africa, where complex tonal language and rhythm were completely indistinguishable.
Yep.
Then we analyzed how Luis Gonzaga leveraged those exact principles, mixing major keys with dissonant minor sevenths to translate the profound suffering and resilience of the Brazilian backlands into the Baião.
Such a powerful example.
And finally, we arrive at the profound realization that learning to understand music isn't merely about understanding sound waves. It is fundamentally about training yourself to be an engaged, empathetic, and responsive citizen in a highly complex society.
Because it is entirely about the pursuit of harmony in the real world.
Absolutely.
And this raises an important question. Considering everything we've explored regarding how deeply sound impacts our internal state, I want you, the listener, to critically examine the dominant rhythms you allow into your life.
That's a great point.
Analyze the media you consume, the physical spaces you inhabit, and the literal music you choose to put in your headphones. What does that specific soundtrack reveal about your environment? Are you intentionally choosing rhythms that force you to connect with and understand the people around you, or are you passively absorbing noise that further isolates you in a bubble?
Listening to all this just makes me realize how unnatural our daily routines have become.
Oh, without a doubt.
If our human brains are truly this hardwired over millennia to understand the world through rhythm, through communal connection, and through musical relation rather than just, raw, isolated data points.
Yeah.
Consider how much of our modern anxiety stems from the fact that our digital lives are fundamentally arrhythmic.
Oh, that is an interesting thought.
Like, think about the physical act of scrolling through a feed. It's a stuttering, broken rhythm. Disconnected text messages popping up at random intervals, endless fragmented videos auto-playing without context. It is a completely discordant experience. It's totally out of tune with our biological nature.
It really is a constant barrage of dissonance.
Right. Perhaps the reason we feel so constantly stressed isn't merely because of what horrifying information we're consuming, but because the jagged, unpredictable rhythm of how we're consuming it lacks all harmony.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
Well, until next time, take a moment to pull out your headphones and truly listen to the room around you. You might be surprised what the world is trying to say.